So many people got it wrong about quiet quitting. They didn't understand the trend and how the trend originated on social media. And the trend was from our younger workforce who was trying to establish healthy boundaries and saying, hey, I see older people at work and they're not taking care of themselves. They may have had a heart attack. They don't take time to nourish or move their bodies. I don't want that to be my future. So I'm going to do a really good job at work during the workday. And when the workday's over, I'm going to focus on my life. That is what quiet quitting was.
You're listening to the TJ Moore Podcast. Today's guest is Chase Sterling from Portland, Oregon. She's the founder and executive director at the nonprofit Wellbeing Think Tank and an international presenter on workplace well-being. She has been a keynote speaker at organizations such as NASA, Harvard, the U.S. Army, Eventbrite, and more. Chase, thanks for joining me.
Hi, TJ. Thanks so much for having me and introducing me to your community. I'm thrilled to be here.
I want to start by sharing the mission statement of Wellbeing Think Tank, which is to educate and empower employers to foster both individual and organizational well-being, creating environments where everyone can thrive. So how did you first start this community and hosting these events?
The concept of Wellbeing Think Tank started in 2019. I actually started doing events in my local community. I did one event, and then our second one was scheduled for March of 2020. And we all know what happened. So I pivoted to virtual, and I like to say I'm an expert in this. I'm very confident in what I do and smart enough to know I don't know everything. So I tapped a bunch of people on the shoulder and we really conceptualized what Wellbeing Think Tank would be. So instead of being an exclusive think tank, it's really a community focused think tank. We want to have a seat at the table for everyone. So we do really elevate experts, but we think everyone should have a voice when we're talking about how do we make workplaces better so we can thrive at and outside of work, because work just has such an impact on our health and well-being. And I just think if we improve workplaces, we can improve the world. And I've been in the field for over 20 years now, which is kind of wild to say. And yeah, I just really wanted to start an accessible community that was evidence-based, where I could help both individuals and organizations really create cultures of well-being.
So over the years, you've actually expanded these into a monthly event series that now reaches thousands of attendees, and you host educational incentives, Be Well workshops, and an annual summit. So what kinds of speakers do you have at these events?
Every quarter, we'll select a theme to take a deep dive into, and we'll look at that theme through the organizational lens. So what can a workplace actually do? Then we look at it through the individual lens. So what can we do for ourselves and our own well-being? But these are also things we could share and scale across an organization. Then we have our actual think tank meetings where we get together as a community and have these conversations. And then most of these are delivered virtually, so people come from all over. And then once a year, we do get together in person in Portland, Oregon, but it's also live streamed. So we invest a lot in the live stream facility. So it's ran by an AV team, which I'm sure you would appreciate. So there's actual videographers and camera people. It's a whole production. So people really feel like they're a part of it. They can join breakout rooms and stuff. So accessibility is our first core value. So I always really try to think about how can we create that accessible pathway to education. I'm someone that really struggled to get an education. I grew up in and out of children's services. I barely graduated high school. I was able to eventually go to college and, go to graduate school, but that's not an option for everyone, especially these days. I have a lot of empathy for our younger generation. So how can we create ways they can learn and be able to get into a career field? So yeah, I'm giving you a lot of information, but I'm so passionate about this work, as you can tell.
Some of the values listed on your organization's website are accessibility, collaboration, inclusion, integrity, and joy. And you've shared with me that one of your priorities is to teach that workplaces should not cause harm. So what kinds of mistreatment have you seen become normalized?
Belonging has been shown to be the lead indicator of our well-being. So a lot of workplaces don't do a good job in cultivating a space where people feel like they belong. And so if you go into work every day, and most of us, we can't just up and quit our jobs. We need that paycheck. We need the benefits. So if we're going into a place every single day and we don't feel like we fit in, we don't feel like we belong, that really creates mental strain and stress. We've obviously seen burnout just skyrocket over the past 6 years. And that mental fatigue, it turns into physical manifestations as well. That's something I've personally experienced and have seen other people go through it as well. Work can literally kill us, and no one should be dying for a paycheck. Whether we're talking about just regular safety of a workplace, right now we're in a time where safety regulations are being lifted and we're seeing more workplace accidents and people dying at work. Workplaces do have a responsibility to cultivate an environment that doesn't cause harm. If on a scale of 1 to 10, you come into work at a 5, at a bare minimum, you leave at a 5. But imagine a world where you went in and you actually like some of the people you work with. And, you could have some conversations, or you have a friend at work, or your supervisor genuinely cares about you as a person. Maybe you were able to talk to a few people, and maybe you went in at a 5 and you left at a 6. Maybe even left at a 7.
So what can companies do to actually help employees feel like they do belong?
I've been really fortunate in my career to work with companies who chose to change. And I've seen workplace cultures transform, and I've seen the impact it's had also from like a nerdy data place, and also just seeing it with my own eyes. And it really fills my cup. I think one of the first things workplaces can do is listen to their workforce. We actually had an event yesterday with Susan Peters. She's a researcher from Harvard University who studies thriving at work and wrote a whole data set and questionnaire. So we talked about, how do we get data safely? How do we really do things anonymously, maybe use a third party? How do we ask questions in the right way? So we got into the hardcore nerdy research part of it. But then there's a lot of lessons learned, I think, about just how do we ask questions? Are we facilitating open conversations? That leads into, a big buzzword the past several years has been psychologically safe workplaces. And that's a workplace where you feel like you can speak up, where if you suggest something, and I think I have a different idea, I'm not scared to say, hey, TJ, what if we did it this way? Because I'm not scared I'm going to get in trouble. There is a big difference between cultivating an environment and a feeling of belonging versus fitting in. Even right now, and we were talking, and you've probably noticed, I've turned on what I call my corporate chase voice. And sometimes I do it with my glasses, and I can really calm my tone down. And I can be, if I'm talking to an executive, this is usually the tone I'm going to go in with.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like what you need to do to fit in. Now, my natural tone is very kind of brash, and I talk really fast and everything. I know how to fit in. And I think from my life and my workplace experiences, if I go to it and I'm working with construction workers, it's going to look super different. That you've worked with a lot of TV and media, very different environment than retail, than white collar office. So we have a biological need to feel like we belong. There's also a lot of neuroscience that goes into that. Do we feel safe? And if we don't feel safe, if we don't feel like we belong, again, it can cause harm. So I think workplaces can start by talking to their people, really learning how to do some employee listening. And something that comes up in every event we do, as something employers can do, is to start with training your supervisors. So anyone that's managing people, there's a lot of things wrong. A lot of companies they say, hey, TJ, you are so great at your job, so we're going to promote you. And now you're going to keep doing your job, and you're also going to manage a team of 10.
Yeah, I have been through that before, actually.
There's a saying, and I don't know who said it first, but it's your culture is the worst behavior you tolerate. So,
whoa,
yeah.
Okay. That
Those values, like you listed off our values. Well, if we said we focus on accessibility and we're not perfect, but we don't offer a virtual option, do we really care about accessibility? Do we offer scholarships? We try to do things. We have free events, and then we do have events that are for our paid supporting members. We see that in corporate a lot. You have core values on a wall, but if you say your core value is X, but you let someone behave in a different way, well, then it's really not a core value.
Yeah, that's their action speaking louder than their employee handbook. So related to this, how can managers help create psychological safety for their teams?
They have to start by doing the work themselves. I like to say we're all a bunch of trauma bags in the workplace. So we all have something. We've all gone through something in life. And so it starts by knowing yourself. It starts by knowing the things I think you're good at, maybe things you're just not so good at, that you want to lean in. You have to be vulnerable with your team and share things with them. You need to share when maybe you're not in a great place or you're struggling. You have to role model good behaviors. So something that happens in so many workplaces is I'll be the manager and I'm like, bye, I'm on vacation, everyone. But then I'm answering emails. I'm online. I get onto a client call. Well, that's showing everyone on my team you actually can't take vacation, that I expect you to work on vacation. And again, just like you said, actions speak louder than words. So someone I managed a long time ago, over 15 years ago, we still talk. And so she's seen me evolve. And something I've heard frequently from people from my past is, but we always know you cared about us. And so I always knew who they were. What are their interests? What's important to them? What are they passionate about? Are they married? Do they have kids? Do they have a pet? Because when but it's hard to teach that. If you don't genuinely care about your people, I can't teach you that.
Yeah, you have to see them not as just like robots that walk in the door and do things for you so that you can make money. Can we talk about ageism? Because
absolutely,
this is I think ageism is something that will never fully be conquered as a issue, because there's always a next generation coming up, and there's always a next generation who's trying to, maybe leave the workplace and go do other things, go travel, spend time with kids, grandkids. In my life, ageism has taken the form of you look young, so you must not be experienced. But some people start very young as well, with no matter what they're passionate about. What are some of the ways that ageism affects team dynamics?
I have had so many jobs. I have even now, and I'll tell you, I'll be 49 in a couple weeks. I have to drop my age into conversations constantly. And in my younger years, it was, well, you can't possibly be old enough. And I remember at one job, and I'm like, we were talking about typewriters one day, and he's like, well, you don't know what I was like, I'm 32. And this was a long time ago. He goes, I was wondering how you got this job. Cause I was like a senior global program manager. And I was like, okay. But also I could have been younger, just been really good. And even I had a young woman that I was kind of mentoring, and she was working with me years ago. And I remember one day she said, well, I want to be like just as good as you. And I said, you are as good as me. I said, we have different strengths and different skill sets. And I said, I have literally just been alive on this world longer. So as a consultant, I have more experience to draw from. And I said, you are amazing for where you're at in your career. So you should never compare, because I've been alive longer. And I was like, and especially with consulting, so much of it's experience. And I was like, so, don't say that. But there is so much ageism. I get very passionate about defending our younger generation. I get very upset at organizations. They're greedy. They just want more money. I'm like, do you know what a living wage is per the MIT living wage calculator? And that should be what your lowest wage worker is making. Our young people are not greedy. They're trying to pay rent. If you don't know what rent costs, you should not be in leadership.
So what stereotypes about different generations do you see are detrimental to teamwork?
Some of my research is how the intergenerational workforce talks about work on social media. So I started doing this project during the early days of the pandemic, and I would pull trends on how people were talking about work. And then I was pulling things primarily from Twitter before Elon bought it, and TikTok. And then now I pull most things from TikTok and Reddit, a little bit maybe on Instagram, but primarily like TikTok and Reddit is where I pull data from. And it's employee listening. It's me like listening to all different ages in the workplace. What are their experiences? And a lot of these, when I teach like inclusion work or talk about ageism or the intergenerational workforce, I don't say the boomers, the X, the millennials, because it's all about where we're at in life. Are you getting ready to retire? Or are you this? Are you that? Like, what does your lifestyle look like? So many of these things are rooted in stereotypes and not science. So people just make up these things. They're like, well, Gen X is like this. Yes, historically, we grew up in a time of latchkey kids, but not everyone was a latchkey kid.
I want to hear your thoughts on work-life separation. How has remote work blurred the boundaries between our professional and personal lives?
From the academic side, I don't want to talk about work-life balance or work-life harmony or work-life integration, which are all kind of researchy terms. We can't achieve work-life balance without work-life separation. So many people got it wrong about quiet quitting. They didn't understand the trend and how the trend originated on social media. And the trend was from our younger workforce who was trying to establish healthy boundaries and saying, hey, I see older people at work and they're not taking care of themselves. They may have had a heart attack. They don't take time to nourish or move their bodies. I don't want that to be my future. So I'm going to do a really good job at work during the workday. And when the workday's over, I'm going to focus on my life. That is what quiet quitting was. It was about establishing healthy boundaries, but I feel like the workplace isn't allowing them. Like the surveillance software, I'm very opposed to the surveillance software, things like, and then it sets up people doing things they weren't doing, like maybe installing a program that moves their mouse or something, a mouse jiggler. It's so silly. No one can be productive for like 8 hours in a row. Like science shows us that. A great example of me failing is earlier in my leadership career. I traveled 60% of the year in that job. I managed like 15 states. I was always on the road. So I worked a lot at night in hotels. So I'd be with my team visiting them. And so I would send emails at night a lot, sometimes on the weekends. Thankfully, we had enough psychological safety that one of those teammates come up and told me, and she told me, she said, hey, Chase, you're stressing everyone out. You're sending these emails. And I was like, oh, and at first a little defensive. I was like, well, that's just when I work. Like, you guys know my schedule. Like, it's kind of crazy. Like, that's just when I get to finally work. And she said, well, Chase, have you thought about using delayed delivery? And I was like, oh, you know what? I haven't thought about that. And I said, but would that stress you all out if all of a sudden you get to work and you get 10 emails from me because they all send at 9? And she's like, well, that's a good point. So we had a team meeting and we came up with email subject etiquette. So it would be like for review, to do with a due date, for action. So we kind of came up with consistencies. So that way it would be very easy to scan your inbox in the morning and say, okay, Chase sent me a bunch of stuff. This I need to read, that I can do later. And so it worked. It worked really well. I had to change my behavior. They had to be willing to work with me. And yeah, we figured it out.
What advice would you give someone whose employer expects them to be available, accessible, responding 24/7?
Sometimes you have to do this in client-facing roles. Like you only reply to emails or you use your delayed delivery. So you kind of start training your employer. Oh, I am fully available from 9 to 5. Like I am on my Slack or Teams or whatever you have me, like you can expect a reply. But after this time, I am off. It does, you do have to have conversations. So you might have to be like, hey, I noticed that there's an excessive workload right now. And like, is there a specific project? Do we need to talk about adjusting my hours? Like
or do overtime, or some people call it crunch mode, but then they don't pay overtime. It has so many different forms that it takes. I have worked for many people that are workaholics. So if your boss is a workaholic, meaning the concept of work-life separation to them is like hilarious. Like they're such a workaholic that they not only work through the weekend, even if it's between another 3 or 8 hours per day on the weekend, but they also work on the evening. So they might be, on the computer here and there from, 8 in the morning through 8 or 9 p.m. So because that they don't have a boundary system, they don't even want one. But then they carry that assumption and that expectation onto their employees. And I've seen and I have experienced that it can create a lot of resentment because they're like, well, I'm a workaholic, so shouldn't you be dedicated and committed? And there's a difference between being committed and having your entire life be consumed, like you're working for Miranda Priestley from Dove Wears Prada, where everything you do when you're off hours is also preparing for and in service of or recovering from what you were expected to do while you were quote unquote on the clock.
Yes, I agree with everything you said. That can be a really hard situation. It's very unique depending on the situation. Sometimes if you have a good relationship, it's being strong enough to have that conversation with the manager yourself and just being like, hey, I really want to find a way for us to work. Like, I want to be a good performer. I care about the work I do, but like, it's also really important to me that I have time to do these things. And like, can we have a conversation? Sometimes I got asked a very similar question like this. And someone said, what about at a family-owned business, which can be a lot of politics? And I said, well, there's usually someone who has that family member's ear. And sometimes you might see this in just a regular workplace. Like, who does that person listen to? So can you go through that person? Can you maybe say, okay, I can't, but TJ and Chase are friends. So maybe I can tell TJ about what Chase is doing and TJ can kind of bring it up to her because he's going to be, oh yeah, like he's a little bit more reasonable and he knows how to communicate with her better. So sometimes it's who has the ear of that person that you can go through. And sometimes you do need to talk to HR, especially if they're asking you to do something that is technically, again, work is a contract. And like you love your job or you want to make sure you keep that job. It's like, there is a point where you have to understand when should you just let someone know. So I think it's thinking about what is within my control that I can protect my peace. And then how can I try to work with this person?
I worked for a company one time where one of the women made like a 2,000 or 3,000 page binder of all of the miscommunication, what she labeled as sexual harassment, but was really just like typing up conversations in the hallways. So then she submitted this binder to HR and she got like a $50,000 settlement from doing this. So yes, that can happen where people start tracking that. I want to ask you, you've told me that people are so starved for authentic connection. So what do you believe has created this disconnect?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Obviously one, and it's a common topic, the loss of third places. So there's not a lot of places for people to go anymore where you're not having to spend money and just be in community together. A lot of people are trying to do things and they do it for shock value. So it's like, can I get into the algorithm? Like, I actually don't believe this, but I'm going to make money off of it. And authenticity is really hard. I have been an early adopter of all social media and I'm just me all the time. And people meet, they're like, wow, you really are this way. I'm like, yes, like I can do nothing except be my most authentic self. Yes, I can. I think I get upset when people talk about bringing their full selves to the workplace. We bring our work self to the workplace. It's like my full self is who I am with my friends. I'm going to bring my professional self into a professional environment. That's okay. So yeah, I think people just want to know, again, it's that human connection. People are really, we've never been more connected digitally, but we've never been more disconnected. We've been in a loneliness epidemic since the advent of social media. And we started to see a lot more research coming out in 2017. And then since the impact of the pandemic, it's made things even worse. So, and again, we have those little computers. So I put my phone away that are connected to us all the time and go analog. It's like, how do we like put things away? How do we just be? How do we have conversations? How do we just get some fresh air? How do sometimes we maybe do some intentional questions where we're really trying to learn so we can work together better. No employee should feel obligated to go to anything that's unpaid off the clock. No, absolutely. During work hours, it should be during work hours and it should be paid.
I want to go over how people can find out more about your organization. Go to wellbeingthinktank.org, and listeners can also go to YouTube and Instagram. It's the same name, Wellbeing Think Tank. You'll find it right away if you just do a Google search. There's also 3 options for people to join the membership on your website. There's a community one that's free. Then you also have a professional and practitioner tiers that have way more advanced features and benefits, such as your resource library of tools, guides, frameworks, and you even have group membership discounts. To contact Chase directly, search Chase Sterling on LinkedIn. And is there anything else you want listeners to know about the events, both virtual and in person, that you do?
Oh gosh, well, I'm so glad you shared the difference. We do have a community membership. We welcome anyone to be a part of our community. There is no prerequisite. The only prerequisite is that you believe workplaces should not cause harm. So if you want to learn about workplace well-being for yourself, for your workplace, like come hang out with us. We're a really fun group. And yes, there's definitely, if you support us as a nonprofit, we're going to offer you more resources. Our summit date has been set for next year. It's February 25th of 2027. So it'll be here in Portland, Oregon. And again, we design it very intentionally. You can land in the airport. You can take the train to the neighborhood where the hotel is, where the venue is. We've thought about kind of everything. Even last year, when you picked up your lanyard, you picked up a burgundy or a green, and it said green kind of like open to hugs, but ask first. And burgundy was like, I'm more of like a fist bump person. So that way people could have an instant like visual of like, oh, this person like, because wellness people tend to be very huggy. So that way it's just an instant, like maybe don't even ask this person because that's not their vibe. We had like a really cool neuroscientist. We had 2 neuroscientists teach us this year. Our last quarter was about art and play for human flourishing. Now we're exploring data. And then next quarter, we're talking about like creative approaches and tracking and like, all these different things we can do for well-being for ourselves and for what it looks like in the 4 walls of the workplace. So thank you so much for sharing so much about us. I appreciate it.
What can people expect from the virtual events that are free?
So we actually run all of our events like meetings. So we don't do webinars anymore because people want that interaction. So even though it's virtual, you get to see the presenter, you get to ask them questions. You can ask them in the chat, or if you want to physically ask your question, because I might not say it the same way you do in the chat. We let people come off mute. People chat in the chat. We let them share their LinkedIn information if they want to. They're not supposed to sell their services in the chat, but I see relationships blossom. I'll see someone come to one of our events and we have no one in common on LinkedIn. And 2 months later, we have 100 people in common. So I've seen these relationships flourish. I've seen people get jobs, friendships. I'm so excited. Several volunteers flew in last year and I live in an apartment. So they got hotels and I was just so honored. But then just this week, I was like, what if I rent a house and we have like a slumber party of the volunteers? If we rent a really big house and people get their own bedroom, there might be a few shared bathrooms, and it's actually cheaper than the hotels for people. And everyone got really excited. So it's very much a community. People really love each other. They really care about each other. They develop these authentic friendships, relationships. I've seen work things come about. I've seen people get jobs and work opportunities, or you do learn. It's like good old fashioned relationship based sales. Someone might be like, oh, you're a leadership coach. I'm actually looking for one. And so that just, if it happens organically, I'm all about it. So I love seeing that. And yeah, people just, it's really beautiful. It fills my cup. It's a lot of work to run a nonprofit. I don't necessarily know if I recommend it because it's an enormous amount of work, but seeing it, seeing people be happy and seeing the impact we have, it really does. That's what keeps me going. I love doing it.
Yeah, it's very rewarding even though it takes a lot of effort. And I love that you guys have these different tiers so people can try, they can get on the virtual events, interact, and then maybe they want to use your guys's, all your resources, your guides, everything. And then they want to come to the real event. So there's an easing into, yes, I want to be part of this in a bigger way. And they can actually move their way up into meeting you and having conversations with you, getting to be part of this community in a deeper way as they move through it. So Chase, thanks for joining me for today's episode.
Yeah, I'm so honored I got to spend time with you. Thank you for your time and giving it to me. And yeah, I look forward to kind of getting to know more people in your community.
To hear more experts share their story, subscribe to the TJ Moore podcast on YouTube and follow this show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to listen anywhere you go. Like and comment on this video if you found today's conversation valuable, and share this episode with someone in your life. I'll see you next week.